Hello, I am Joel McLeod.
I'm Ron Montana.
And welcome to the 905er. Earlier this year in May, the Halton Catholic District School Board made headlines internationally for deciding not to raise the pride flag at its schools, despite overwhelming support from teachers, students, and parents to do so. That debate was marked by being a highly contentious one amongst its board members, with tactics by a minority of the board members resulting in the meeting ending before a decision could be made and forcing a special meeting to be called. Rather than that being an isolated event, the behavior exhibited during that meeting has become standard at subsequent meetings. Board meetings have ended without accomplishing many items on the agenda, and many of the debates evolving into arguments over minutiae and bad faith behavior. It has gotten so bad that Chair of the Board, Pat Murphy, has taken the extraordinary steps to call in a third party to evaluate the conduct of board members. That report was tabled in early September. In the report, the board is described as being dysfunctional, with a minority of trustees engaging in, and I quote here, dilatory behavior to derail meetings, and simple discussions ending up in accusations of misconduct against board members and board staff, and a general breakdown in decorum at the school board. It does not paint a good picture of the board. In the description, it seems that no one on the board gets along, and that they are increasingly at odds with each other and are unable to get the business of the board completed. We've been covering this story and focusing on the school board for quite some time, and we wanted to reach out to the chair of the board, Pat Murphy, whom we've had on the podcast numerous times before, to come on and discuss the report and what he views is the next steps for the Halton Catholic School Board to resolve this issue. Now, before we begin, I'd like you to consider to support us by joining our Patreon or by buying us a coffee. Your generous donation will help us continue to grow the 905er and to keep focusing on the stories and issues that are most important to you here in the region. You can find links to both of those sites on our show notes, and we highly encourage you to do so. But for now, please enjoy the episode. Well, I would like to welcome back to the 905er HCDSB School Board Chair Patrick Murphy to discuss interesting developments at the school board in the last few months. As our listeners will remember from our opener, and if you've been paying attention, the Halton Catholic School Board introduced an interesting plan to bring in a third-party examiner to examine the conduct of the board's trustee makeup and their bylaws and whatever have you, to see about the conduct of the board. Pat, thanks for coming back on the podcast to discuss this. And why don't we just kick it off with you maybe explaining, as the person who introduced this motion at the school board, what is the reasoning behind asking this third party to come in and examine the conduct of the board?
Well, thank you for inviting me on today and having me back. So this is the third year of our 4-year mandate. And from the beginning of our mandate, we had 8 newly elected trustees. There's been a lot of contentious issues and challenges in getting the business of the board done. And that started from day one. And we have done various training sessions and professional development sessions, and things were not getting any better. So in my role as the chair, I had to try and make sure that we're effective, make sure that we're using our resources correctly, make sure that the public who is giving us a substantial amount of money to educate our children has confidence in what we're doing. And I saw that eroding as a challenge. So I thought it was important to have a third party come in and give us a lay of the land. Hold up a mirror to all trustees and say, as an impartial observer, this is what I see. There were some specific issues that we asked for. There was allegations against bias, the way that I run a meeting, and there was some allegations that staff was not doing things properly. Well, we can't have that in a publicly funded institution. That can't go unaddressed. So that needed to be addressed. I was more than happy if I'm the problem by all means, I can recuse myself and fade into the sunset. If I'm on the right path and I'm doing what I should be doing, and I am impartial, and I am, basically the chair is the referee. The chair doesn't create the rules. The chair doesn't have ultimate authority. The chair just has to impartially apply the rules. So if I'm doing that, then I can continue on that path, and that gives some reassurance. But the other aspect was for all trustees to be able to have an objective view on how they're conducting themselves, to give them time to reflect, and if there was solutions that this third-party investigator could come up with to help us, then we should look at those, discuss them, and then adopt them as a group. So that's really, I was at the point where I felt that we needed to have that objective view.
Well, I did read the report that was provided to the board when it was tabled. There was a couple notes that stood out to me from the report, and one was that the auditor that you hired pointed out that on many action items that the board needs to vote on, right now the board is typically voting on a 5-4 split. That's typically how these votes come down. So there's clear that there is a majority to push forward an agenda of some sort in the board. Yet, we're still seeing a lot of the board meetings going over the allotted time. There's a lot of special board meetings to be called back. So to just carry on the regular agenda, nothing even like controversial. It's just the regular business of the board. I'm wondering if this 5-4 majority is existing. Like, why is the business of the board not getting done? Can you maybe kind of give us a little bit of insight into that?
Well, the business is getting done. It's just being done with more effort and more time and more resources. But the business is getting done, because then that's why we're having the special meetings. The question is, does it have to go this way? And my opinion would be no. There are other ways to do it. But I think it's important to recognize that the third-party investigation was fairly astute in that, look at it from if you want to call it majority and minority, for lack of a better way of describing it at this point. Look at it from the minority's point. If they think their voice isn't being heard, if they don't feel that they're being valued, then there is potential that behavior could change. So I think that's important. I think I'm not trying to lay blame or say, is it right or is it wrong? It's a reality. And that's not what the board is supposed to be. So trustees are supposed to be honest brokers. We're supposed to come to the table with the expectation that we are going to listen to other people's point of view. We're going to negotiate, and we're going to make concessions. So that's really what it's supposed to be. And I think there's something in that point, which the third-party investigator had brought up.
Well, I mean, that's how every government body is supposed to act. I mean, you can have that freedom of dissent and contrary points of view. But the other point that I thought stood out to me from the report was major problems that were identified as quote unquote dilatory behavior on the part of let's be honest, the 4 minority trustees. And he singled out behavior such as constantly amending motions being brought forward, points of order and appeals on those points of order on your decision as chair, that it starts to prolong meetings long before or longer than needed. And it's behavior that's intended to kind of, by lack of a better term, just run down the clock. And I want to know, as chair, do you consider this kind of behavior bad faith behavior on the part of these trustees conducting this behavior? What do you think should be done about this?
So the reality of the way that it is structured is we cannot question the intent of another trustee. So it makes it very difficult. If I'm not allowed to question their intent, then how can I say they're delaying on purpose? They have a right. They have at some point you have to make that call. So what helped me from the third party investigation was in the way that he restructured his response, said, okay, this gives you, Mr. Chair, this gives you some guidelines. Clearly, once you get to this point, you have grounds to state that that's dilatory. Now, the only tools I have are to, publicly reprimand, to to take the floor away from them so they're not allowed to speak, or worst case scenarios, have them removed from the meeting. Those are the only choices that I have. So, and as you can imagine, removing somebody from a meeting is very extreme, and it's not something that, as a chair, I want to do. It builds bad faith, and there's many reasons not to do it. But if I have to do it, I have to do it. So it makes it very challenging when you don't have ultimate authority. So everything that the chair does can be overruled by other trustees. It can be could be voted on. So you're basically, for lack of a better way of describing it, a referee in a hockey game, and you can call penalties. You can put people in a penalty box. You can throw them out of the game. That's it. You can't unilaterally change the rules. You can't unilaterally suspend somebody. You can't do any of those. And everything you do can be appealed. So it's not surprising that these things happen.
And those are the provincial rules. They're not. I mean, the rules are set by the province, and you have to go by them. Is that correct, or are you able to kind of set your own rules of procedure to an extent?
The Education Act sets certain rules, and basically then overall it states that every board is self-governed. So being self-governed, yes, you have freedom, but you also have some real challenges in that. We can't bring a dispute to a judge. So we have to, and everything can be appealed. So you're now getting into a situation where he said, she said, then it has to go to the board of trustees to be voted on. It can be appealed. So you're really almost in a circular argument, and there's nobody overseeing it to stop it. So that's why a lot of times it doesn't get taken to that degree. So it's very challenging in those respects.
And you're not able to say it, but I can say that any committee, any board, any parliament, any legislature needs a certain amount of good faith on the part of the people who are there to recognize when they've lost, if you like. It's like, well, okay, we disagree on this. There's so many votes on this side, and there's so many votes on that. We've had a good discussion about it. We've all raised our points, and the other guys have won. Okay, that's fine. We'll vote on it, and then we can move on to the next thing. It seems strange that things would be so heated at a school board level, and I'm wondering if it's possible for you to kind of, what is the division about ultimately? If there have broadly been 5 board members on one side and 4 on the other, what's kind of at the root of it? Is it about finance? Is it the religious component entirely, or what's kind of given rise to this?
That's very difficult for me as chair to be able to comment on. I would say that when you have 9 independently elected officials, many who run very contentious campaigns within a region, that contention gets brought to the board table and gets amplified. And I think you can put those pieces together, and as you said, there has to be good faith brought into it. And it's the will of this board and every board to be able to function and to be able to we don't have to like each other. We don't have to send each other Christmas cards, but we have to function. So it's strictly because the rules won't guide us there. The only thing that will guide us is goodwill on part of all members to get there.
Well, on that note, then, Chair Murphy, let me ask you this: do you think that the board gets along as they are right now?
No, like you can't, you couldn't. The most optimistic person in the world could not say that. And honestly, it's not. I don't want to say it's not important that people don't get along. If you're respectful and you disagree in a respectful way, and the odd time it bubbles up and bubbles down, and you apologize or you say something that is you shouldn't have, or I think people respect that, and that's fine. I don't think it's important that we like each other. I think it's important we respect each other, and I think it's important that we understand the gravity of what we've been awarded with to steward and protect, and that should impact how we react and temper our what we say and what we do.
Well, I mean, I've been watching and leading up to this interview, and over the course of the past year, we've been watching your meetings live, and I can say that the behavior of some of the trustees, I won't name them, but some of the trustees, it is rather quite childish. I've never seen. I can imagine this conduct happening at Queen's Park or in Parliament. I mean, they're not the bastions of civil discourse by any stretch of the imagination, but I mean, the behavior is quite absurd. And for listeners who are not watching as diligently as I am, I mean, we're talking about getting into the minutiae of, we can't even pass the agenda in some cases without getting into this back and forth rancor over the minutiae of obscure rules and rulings. And I mean, the last meeting, one trustee was talking about we have to postpone the meeting because we should get a municipal lawyer involved to make a ruling, which, like, there's something happening here that's beyond just a matter of professional disagreement or a disagreement of policy. And I'm just wondering, what exactly is it? Like, is there a path forward that you can heal this divide? Do you think? Like, how do you fix the next year so that board meetings can basically end on time?
Well, we're working on a PD session that will encompass most of the report. So part of that is building consensus and the ability to work together. Part of it is on understanding what the role of the trustee, because that's another aspect of trustees are policymakers. We are governors. So the saying is nose in, fingers out. So our responsibility is to ask the question, make sure that the procedures, the policies and procedures are being followed, making sure resources are being used properly. Our responsibility is to have a vision of the future and to direct the director of education through his senior staff to where we want to be. Our responsibility is not what's being served in the cafeteria for lunch, is not why doesn't my child have a French teacher? All of those aspects of what the demands that parents expect or want from us versus what our actual job is. And, so part of the conflicts that I see also is understanding really what your role is. From a financial side, our role is to look at the audited statements and ask questions on the audit statements. Our role isn't to do the audit. Our role isn't to say, well, how come you hired 13 teachers, you should have only hired 10. That's a problem. When we start asking those questions, we're not doing what we should be doing. So part of that PD session is to have that. And the other element is bringing in the faith element of if we have this commonality of the same faith, and the faith teaches us to approach humanity and others a certain way, what are we doing in our practice to make sure we're living that faith? And that, bringing in one of our chaplains or maybe even if the bishop is available himself to come in and to have those conversations. Then it boils down to will. Is there the will to, when any conflict, somebody has to be willing not to take the next shot. So somebody has to be willing, not was taken at them, to say, okay, I'm not going to go there. Let's move forward.
And
until that happens,
the question now is, what happens when that person doesn't back down? Because there are listeners to this podcast who are thinking of a few trustees in mind who are, what happens when the person needs to have the last word in no matter what? Can you still function as a board if that's going to be the atmosphere?
Well, you can function. We're functioning now. It's taking 30% more time. We're having one or two special meetings. There's a great cost to doing it. There's a great cost to resources. There's a great cost to our personal lives, to our careers, to our family. When we're spending all of this extra time, there's personal cost into, finishing a meeting at 11:30 and your tension is up to here. So we committed to do the job. I committed to do the job. We're going to do the job. You can frustrate the business of the board. You can delay the business of the board. You're not going to stop the business of the board, right? So the business of the board is going to go forward. It doesn't have to be this way, but if that's the way it is, then that's the way it is. And then when the term is over, there's a new opportunity to do things differently.
So there's obviously the most listeners, and certainly outside of Halton, the thing that really hit the headlines was the discussion over the pride flag. And from your point of view, this is one story amongst many, but it got literally international attention when that meeting happened, or that two meetings I believe happened. Do you think that? Do you think discussions of sexuality, gender, things like this actually have any business being discussed at a school board level?
That's a really good question, because if you look at it, the majority of the time that the board spends is on non-academic issues. And part of that is it's downloading from the social structure of government and how things are paid for. Mental health is a primary issue that school boards have to deal with. The family unit, or impacts of the family unit, equity amongst access to technology, and all of those things, which are happening in society, are really being the school board is expected, because we are publicly funded. We are expected to be involved in those issues, where when I went to school, there was none of that, basically. So I think it's a change. It's a shift in society. It's the Ministry of Education expects it and requires it, and social issues around equity and what have you. So it is a shift. It is a change. I think there is generationally. If you look at it, there's a mix of people at the table, and some people it's obvious and it's normal and it's natural, of course, and others is it's not reading, writing, and arithmetic, right? So I think you bring up a very interesting point, that there is a shift, and there's going to be a transition period where school boards have to find their way from what the expectation of parents is versus what we conceive, or the resources, the abilities, we can't be all things to all people, but we definitely, there's a lot of crossover in certain areas with society. And the reality is also society is polarized. That is going to creep into the school board also. But
on that, the notion of the pride flag debate, you had to have two meetings to ultimately decide not to fly the flag at the board buildings, schools in the board. No other school board in the province had to have two meetings, if I understand. And this kind of comes back to our topic today: is that why was every other board able to to have their debates? And they had very vigorous debates. I'm thinking of Toronto Catholic Board. They had their debates and everything, and they managed to get a vote passed by the end of the night. Here in Halton Catholic, we had the dilatory behavior running down the clock, and then we had to have a special meeting to come back. And again, that pride flag took up the entire length of debate. Why is that the case? Why do we cannot have a very passionate, vigorous debate, but we have the vote, and whatever the vote happens is, we get into this rancor and breakdown of discourse.
I'll indirectly answer your question. So,
okay.
Specifically about the pride flag, so believe it or not, the issue never was brought to the board. It was never discussed at the board table. We had a student who delegated to the board, very good presentation. That was the beginning of the questions. And then there was a groundswell movement. So other boards, Toronto Board, Waterloo, discussed this over many years. So, when something doesn't come up through the system, so it was brought to us by a student, but that's the first time. We didn't have staff reports on it. We didn't have a movement from within the system saying this is important to us. We didn't have parent councils coming to us saying this is important to us. So we're basically at a position now where we have to go through to satisfy that we're being responsible, we're making the right decision for our community, which is our schools, and the parents and people associated with the school. So when you have, and honestly, the amount of emails and correspondence was incredible. Over 1,000, 1,500, 18 or whatever the case may be. And it was very clear there was two sides. Absolutely not and absolutely yes. There was nothing that was anywhere close to common understanding. So through our discussions, we said, okay, if you're going to universally accept a symbol, then it has to be universally understood. This symbol is not universally understood. And I understand there'll be people listening to this and saying, are you crazy? What are you talking about? But that's the reality of what the information we're getting from parents, from parish, from teachers, from principals on both sides. So what we thought was the responsible thing to do was then let's work towards educating our community. And it's our community. What happens in the rest of the world, I respect it, but that's not what our job is. We have to make decisions that are right for our schools. So let's work on educating, understanding, developing a common knowledge. Then through our system, if it comes back that, yes, this is right for us, then we should be making those types of decisions. But until you went through that process, it was really difficult to make that decision.
One follow-up on this, and then we can move on to something else. But looking at the grassroots, this issue in particular with the pride flag and with LGBTQ equality in the Halton Catholic School Board is not going away anytime soon. I'm confident that you as a chair know that there are a lot of parents and a lot of teachers and a lot of students who are very passionate about seeing progress being made on this file. I understand that there's no vote coming forward anytime soon on the calendar, but something like this is going to come up again. I will not be surprised if we see a similar motion put forward for next year's Pride Month.
Well, we have a report coming back in January, right? Regarding, we have a report, requested a staff report to come back with what is the success of the program. We committed to the program. We're committed to the program long term. It wasn't a one-off. So we're expecting that report back in January. From that report, it's going to go where it goes. Right?
But I guess my question is, because coming back to the topic of today's episode of the division in the board, this is how do we avoid another 2 meeting long divisive a meeting on this topic again, and we can maybe just have one meeting where we can have both sides come to the table. They can air their grievances, but we can have a civil and productive meeting on this, and it doesn't degenerate into what we saw back in May. As chair, I'm wondering if you have any insights on terms of how do we fix that so that it's a better meeting for all parties involved.
You're giving me questions that I can answer. I can answer over a beer, but not. Well,
that sounds like a good plan.
So, they're I'm trying to find the right way to put these words together. The Board of Trustees is responsible for policy and not daily operation or not operation of the schools. That's I need you to fill in the blank.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, I'm going to guess when you took on the job of chair, you didn't expect things to be quite this contentious. And ultimately, I think you said that there just simply needs to be that willingness to compromise and work together, and that's how every public organization ultimately works. Is however much you disagree, there comes a point where you have to say, okay, this is where the rubber hits the road. But how much do you think these debates? I mean, I think theoretically, if the board had voted this year to raise pride flags, I'm guessing that it would have been pretty much a non-story in the media, judging by the decisions that were made in some other school boards. Do you think that these kind of debates really harm your board in particular, but the kind of reputation of the Catholic school boards in general?
It harms all school boards. It's trustees. It's not necessarily Halton Catholic trustees. It's trustees. It harms all of school boards. It harms publicly funded education, which, as you're aware, is a significant portion of the Ontario budget. I would, in my opinion, speaking as a trustee, not as a chair, if the debate at the table would have been different regarding the pride flag, there would not have been the media attention and the pushback and the upheaval. I think the nature of the discussion made it seem like there was aggression towards the community, which in my heart I don't believe exists. I truly don't believe it. I think it was an opportunity to have a fight, and neither side was going to back down, and they rode. It's I always like the proverb of the frog and the scorpion, right? Where the scorpion's on the frog's back, says, "I won't sting you." They cross the river, and then the scorpion stings him and says, "It's my nature." If it's your nature to fight to win at all odds, that's a problem. That's going to be a challenge. It's going to be an ongoing problem. The role of the chair then is to make sure business gets done and make sure that you mitigate as much damage as you can. The positive is that we're arm's length from the daily operation of the schools. We have fantastic senior management and principals and teachers. My children are in the school. They're so happy to be back in class. Their teachers are wonderful. Everything is engaged. So this little bubble that we're in is not going to impact to any great extent our students and the knowledge and their learning. So we'll get there. It's just going to take longer.
I see we're coming up on we've passed the half hour mark, so I'm thinking we're going to wrap this up. But I want to ask you one final question, give you the final word, Chair Murphy. And the question is a simple one. Just with the current conduct of the board and having this, a third party auditor come in to evaluate the conduct, what do you have to say to parents, the students and teachers who are questioning their confidence in the ability of the board to get what needs to be done currently?
Well, it worked. As I said, the work is getting done. And very important motions are being passed. We're starting an equity audit, well ahead of many boards in the province, which is going to be a seismic change potentially to a lot of our policies and what we do, and will guide us for the next period of time. We are working on our strategic plan. We're going to start our bylaw reviews. So if it takes us 2 special meetings a month, it takes us 2 special. We're going to get the work done. Nobody will stop the business of the board. Will it necessarily be pretty? No, but the work will get done. And very important matters are being dealt with. We're society. There's a lot of change in our society in the last 2 years, and we're trying to keep up with that. And I think it's on our radar. So we will get there. It's going to take maybe longer than it should, but we will get there in the end.
And I'm just going to extend our interview by one question, because I think it would be good to just dive into that very briefly to almost give you an opportunity to talk about what comes next for the board. Now, when you talk about, you're looking at equity and things like that, can you explain that for the sort of non-involved listener or people like me who maybe don't pay attention when they should, what exactly that means and what would change and what's being discussed?
So we're engaging a third-party company that specializes in doing equity audits. So an equity audit, they will look at everything from your hiring practices, all of your policies, how you conduct business, everything relating to every function within your organization under an equitable lens. So are there systemic barriers? Well, logically, there is in every, we're a colony that has developed into what we are today. So obviously there is some issues there. When we look around the boardroom table, do we see diversity? So what can we do there? All of those aspects are on the table. Everything is open. And then this equity audit will come back with recommendations. And then the board will have to go through that and accept changes or make changes to policies and what have you. So everything from recruiting, hiring policies, how are internal disputes handled, all of those issues will be reviewed from somebody who is obviously an expert in that field, and will inform us of where we need to change to make sure we're better.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Chair Murphy, for taking the time to come on the podcast tonight or today. We wish you all the best of luck in your future endeavors, and stay in touch.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for having me. I notice I'm episode 100, so I was expecting a small cake or something, but
yes,
maybe next time.
Yeah, well, very small cake, but yeah, no, yeah. Well, That is something to celebrate for sure. Anyway, well, thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
That's it for this episode of the 905er. Thank you for listening. As always, you can send us your feedback, thoughts, and concerns or ideas for future episodes to our email, info@905er.ca. We love to hear from you. You can help us keep the 905er going by financially supporting us through Patreon as well as PayPal. Visit us at 905er.ca and click on the support tab. As well, links are in the show notes for your convenience. Lastly, you can find us on social media. Search for _905er on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So long for now. See you next time.